a peanut butter nutrition bar. I'm not going to say a brand name until people give us money.
Okay. I was like, why are you saying nutrition bar? Is it gross?
It's a little dry.
Good. I was munching on some sour cream and onion chips, and I almost was like, oh no, I'm going to have bad breath. And then I was like, wait a minute.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We're not in the same room, and the listeners can't smell it until technology catches up with the times. So you can smell what you're listening to.
You know what I can smell?
What?
My socks, because I wore them yesterday too. But
no,
I was in such a rush, and all of my socks are unmatched and in a basket. So these were just on the floor, so I picked them up and put them on, and they smell really bad.
Oh, wear unmatched next time over second
These
day.
ones are unmatched, but
okay,
yeah.
But our people can't do that. We can't do that. We're not second day sock wearers.
Yeah, they're ripe.
Ugh,
ripe.
I am glad neither one of us can smell the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, before we jump into it, I need to talk real quick about the Cruella movie.
Yeah.
Disney's done it again. They really killed off a parent in the most dramatic way. Spoilers. It was an amazing movie, first of all. My oldest loved it. She's the one who wanted to watch it because they watched it in their fashion camp.
Fashion? That's adorable.
Fashion camp. She sewed a tote bag and a skirt and a pencil case.
Ooh.
And they had a little fashion show at the end of the week, and she walked in the fashion show
That's so
with
cute.
stuff that she had. I know, it was really cute. But in Cruella, and if you haven't seen it yet, it really is a fantastic movie. It has Emma Stone in it and another very famous actress whose name I can't remember, but you can look it up should you choose. Cruella's mom gets pushed over a balcony by 3 Dalmatians and dies. And you see it. You see her get pushed over the cliff and fall to her death.
Do you think I could find the clip on YouTube?
I bet you could. My eyes must have been so big. I put this on for my children, one of whom has already seen it. I looked later, and it is rated PG-13.
Ooh.
For, I'm assuming, the murder.
Dalmatian murderers.
Dalmatian murder. Yeah. And I feel like probably the Dalmatian community had some things to say about this movie because it was very anti-Dalmatian.
Did they purposefully push her?
See, if I get into that, it really will give you spoilers.
I'm not going to watch this, so I think it's okay.
Okay. Well, everybody else put your earmuffs on if you don't want to know. Technically, they did, but only because their bad lady owner used her dog whistle, which means to attack. And so they just did what they had been trained to do. And so it's not their fault.
Death called them.
Death did call them, and they answered.
Okay, let me see if I can find this clip quick.
Okay.
Oh, Cruella mother death scene comes up real quick.
Good.
There she goes.
There she goes.
The music for it's pretty cool. It was pretty neat, actually.
Oh, it's a very well done movie. It's basically like Devil Wears Prada meets 101 Dalmatians.
I was going to say meets 100.
That's kind of what it is. It was enjoyable, but that really caught me off guard. So I just needed to tell people.
Yeah, I like how you just can't have a mean villain, or you just can't have, sometimes people just suck, and I think Disney should embrace that. Like, sometimes people are just dicks, and I want there to be a Disney villain. I'm sure that somebody is going to mention that there is one, but I'm like, I want there to be a Disney villain that has like a really great upbringing and stuff, but they're just like, God, I'm awful.
You know what though? I think you should watch this movie. Because you might find a villain that is actually just a dick.
Okay. Is it a dog?
No.
Also, Dalmatians, it's just funny because Dalmatians are not like usually recommended for kids. Like, they're not generally, and I know this is like, somebody's like, my Dalmatian's great. I don't fucking care. I don't know your Dalmatian. As a breed, they're not known to be like the friendliest of dogs.
It is interesting, yeah, that there was a whole kids movie based on Dalmatians that did, as a kid, make me think like, oh my gosh, I want a Dalmatian.
Yeah.
And then, come to find out that they're maybe not, like you said, the most recommended family dogs. I'm sure we all know some amazing Dalmatians out there. And they're fire dogs for some reason.
Yeah, I remember our babysitter had a Dalmatian, but also I can't remember if it was her or mom, but it was just like, by the way, doesn't love kids.
I kind of don't remember that, actually. Sorry.
I'm going to Google why Dalmatians are...
Oh, I thought you were going to say, I'm going to Google our babysitter.
That'd be creepy. Real quick, the York County Fire Service says the Dalmatian is a very loyal breed to its owners and an admirable foe when challenged. What, by fire? Because of the dog-horse bond, the Dalmatians easily adapted to the firehouse in the days of horse-drawn fire wagons.
Okay, but most of the qualities they just described, loyalty, won't back down from a challenge. Isn't that kind of like most dogs?
This is weird. This one says because they're deaf, the fire sirens won't hurt their ears or spook them.
No, they can't be deaf.
Well, not all of them. I did think I remember seeing something about like it's more common for purebreds for them to have stuff, but in general, purebreds have more issues. Look, I think people just thought they looked cool. I think people picked them because of like they have a very distinct look, and that makes a really great mascot. Let's like not try to make it something that it isn't.
Okay. No, you're right. All right. Well, we're not talking about Cruella this episode. That was a big sidebar. What we are talking about, because it is still Pride Month, we are still bi.
For this month only.
This month only, except for when we are us. We're going to talk about Will and Grace today.
Ooh, that sounds delightful.
You know, it actually, I think, will be delightful. Now, sort of crapped out halfway through my research, but we're going to get through it together. Because we kind of know this show and its characters by heart. So I mostly rewatched as many episodes as I could just to kind of like get back into, I don't know, that headspace and like remember some of the jokes. But honestly, as I was watching and laughing again at the jokes I've heard a million times, I was like reciting things in my head. But for anybody who hasn't watched the show, first of all, you should. Even today, I would say, I'm going to go ahead and spoiler alert it. I would say it's still very relevant and it holds up pretty well. There are obviously some little things here and there, but it also came out in 1998. So it's more of a just because of the time, not necessarily because it has like a whole bunch of issues. I rewatched, I think, a few episodes of the first season, and I watched the pilot specifically because this really, obviously, as any show does, lays out who the characters are. So we know Will's a lawyer. Grace is an interior designer. I always loved their apartment. But looking back on it now, I do wonder, they're living in New York. They seem to have a pretty nice apartment. They both do have really good jobs, but do you think like...
Oh, absolutely.
I guess I need to know from somebody, they couldn't have afforded that apartment.
I guess Will, it depends on how good of a lawyer, but I still don't think that Grace could have. I feel like though that's one of the complaints I have heard about the show, and it's the same thing about Friends, where it's just like they couldn't afford those, but it's weighing the benefit of the reality versus the benefit of just like having a cooler set.
Yeah, because I love that apartment even now. And part of it, I think, is just the nostalgia. Like it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy, but it's a cool apartment. But I did start to think, and also maybe when they were sharing it, because they both do have good jobs, they don't have kids. They move in together, I guess, after the first episode. So it was just Will's before that.
Ooh, I'm looking up what it would have cost.
That would have been something I should have done.
No, it's fine. Let's see.
And if you'll remember, too, at some point, Grace does move out again across the hall.
According to Glamour, and I'm not even clicking on the link because I don't care that much, their apartment would have been $6,750 a month for Will's apartment.
In late 90s money.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not clicking the article.
So expensive. And it sounds like we're not the only people to point this out. But again, it's pretty much every sitcom set in a city. You're not really going to get to see what somebody's actual apartment would look like, except maybe in Kimmy Schmidt. That's probably the only accurate representation of like a big city living
Right.
space that I've ever seen. But everything else, they're like, no, people don't want to look at that. I mean, you look at Sex in the City, people have complained often about how Carrie Bradshaw was like a freelance writer and she lived in like this opulent apartment. And they're like, there's no way. And she spent a ton of money on clothing.
I never watched Sex and the City because it seemed like the most boring thing next to Friends for me. So I can't
Wow.
comment.
Hot takes, hot takes.
Yeah, I can't stand either.
I can see that for you.
I remember trying to watch, like, I remember because you and mom liked Friends, really liked Friends. And I remember you guys, you watched Friends.
I did a little bit, but I wouldn't say I was like an avid.
Well, I didn't say that, first of all.
Wow.
I thought that you guys liked it because I just remember it being on and being like, God, this is boring.
I did watch it. I'm not saying I never watched any episodes, so please don't come for me. But it definitely, like, I had a friend in high school who decorated the interior of her locker with Friends memorabilia. I mean, she was majorly into the show. And I was like, it's fine. Did I laugh at it sometimes? Yes. But even now, it would be something I would have on the background if it was on.
I'm sorry, we're not here to discuss it. Maybe we will, though. And I'll talk about how I hate everyone.
Make you watch it.
Anyways, back to Will and Grace.
We also, in this very first episode, see a brief cameo from Jack's bird. Do you remember his bird's name?
Oh, I don't. I forgot about the bird until you brought it up.
It's Guapo.
Guapo, yeah.
We see Guapo because the original plan was that Jack was going to move in with Will at the start of the show. But Grace, who is nearing 31 years old in the pilot.
There's no way.
We are older than her.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
How old are you now?
I realized I'm 31. I forgot.
Okay, so you're her age and I'm older than her. And she is engaged to, or she gets engaged to Danny.
Oh, gross.
Danny, yes, Danny is the boyfriend that Will absolutely
We all hated fucking Danny.
Danny is a douche. Danny's essentially just a frat boy. And he disappears, but then unfortunately in a later season, they get back together very briefly.
Unfortunately, doesn't disappear in a true crime way. He just...
No.
Yeah.
We get to see Karen. I can't decide who my favorite character is because they're all necessary and they all play off each other so well. But Karen might be my favorite by just a little bit. I
think I'm going to have some takes that might upset you during this talk. But I will say Karen is one of my favorite. She's one of those people where in real life, people like that, sort of like everybody in Arrested Development, they're not funny. They're not like, they're just horrible to be around. But as a character, hilarious, perfect.
Yes.
I want my
Oh, yeah. She has some of the best lines, her and Jack, and their chemistry is so good.
I also love how we just never see Stan.
Never.
It's excellent.
Never. There's one scene in a recent episode I watched where she's in the bathtub on the phone and he's supposed to be in the bath with her, but you never see him. But at one point she does like throw a loofah at him and say something like, Stan, that had better be soap on a rope.
I remember that.
But you're right. I love that we never see him because you don't need to.
No, it makes it funnier.
It does. So we're introduced to her. She is Grace's, and I use the term loosely, assistant. And they right away explain that the reason she gets to work for Grace, because she's, as you'll find out watching the series, I mean, she's lazy. She barely shows up for work. She drinks on the job. She pill pops. But they say something to the effect of like her social contacts keep Grace's business afloat. Which looking back, though, I'm like, ouch. I don't know. Are we insinuating that like Grace can't keep business based on her own skill?
I don't think that's probably what's supposed to be insinuated, but I guess it kind of does. I think it's just that
they just have to explain why such an awful employee stays there.
Yeah, and that she probably does bring a lot of clients.
Okay, fine. Do you remember Will's hair in the first few episodes? Because it is yikes.
I don't know. I'll look it up quick as you talk.
And they change it pretty quickly. So I don't know. I don't know if they had like a focus group or what, but his hair in the pilot especially,
Yeah.
yes. What would you, it's like kind of soccer mom. What would we call?
It's kind of like it's a little like soccer mom mullet.
Mm-hmm. It's not completely party in the front, but yeah, it's pretty bad. So thankfully they take care of that. So Danny, who we talked about, who we hate, Grace ends up leaving him at the courthouse where they're getting married. And that's when she moves in with Will. That's sort of the whole setup for the relationship. Oh, and I guess I didn't mention it. Will is gay. He's gay. She's straight. They're best friends.
Honestly, the
together.
show's been out for so long that I feel like even if you
I
haven't
know.
watched it, I would hope that like this is just in the cultural zeitgeist.
I would think so, but you never know with people.
True.
I actually think season 1 might have some of the best episodes because we've got the Ice Capades episode.
Oh God, that's a great one.
That's an amazing one. We have these are not the episode titles. These are what I'm calling them. The cabin episode.
Yeah, that's a good one
where they
too.
all go up to Karen's cabin. This is also where we first get the word spramp.
Oh yeah, I still use spramp.
We use it a lot. Actually.
I use it at my job. Even my boss looks like a metalhead and he's like over 6 feet tall. And I described to one of his like childhood friends who's also like a metalhead, this big dude. I was like, oh yeah, I think he just spramped next door. And he looked, I just kind of laughed because the idea of him spramping and also the word spramp probably.
Yeah. Jack tries to play this as a word in Scrabble. Every morning I spramp my face with water. We also get a Gilmore Girls guest star in this one. So the actor who plays Christopher is in this episode. He's the kind of mountain man guy that Grace knew from long ago and makes out with, but she's trying to hide him from Will because the whole point of them being at the cabin is that it would have been Will and his ex's anniversary. And so she's trying to distract him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I remember the guy, but I didn't remember that it was Christopher. We also get introduced to Val in season 1.
Oh, God, I hated Val.
I mean, yes, but I also love those episodes. I wouldn't have wanted her in it full time, but just those couple episodes she was in it. When they have their girl fight.
Yeah, no, that is pretty funny. Yeah, same thing. Like, if she had been in any more, it would have been too much. You know what my favorite episode is, though?
Tell me.
It's Alley Cats, and that is the name of the episode. It's from season 1, but it's the one where they're competing over, like, Grace and Will are competing and arguing over, they're both like, I'm not that competitive, like I can be chill about things, and then it turns into a competition, and it's
a competition over not being competitive.
Yes.
The end of that episode, the slow-mo
bowling
when Grace gets her, is it her strike or does she get the spare? Whatever, when they win the game. And then they do the slow-mo of her like jumping into Will's arms, and then she points at Rob and Ellen, who are their friends that they're playing against, and you just see her mouth, you suck.
Yeah. That is why it's my favorite. It's that whole sequence at the end. And then Rob and Ellen are like kind of falling.
Yes, they act like they've been like shot wounded, or something, and they fall to their knees, and it's so good. That is one of my favorites too. Let's talk a little bit about Rob and Ellen, because I kind of want to talk about some of the other supporting characters. And Rob and Ellen are like the super annoying. They almost come across as like Midwest in a way.
Yeah.
Like straight couple friends of both Will and Grace. I think they all went to college together.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And they're just like, they're like tap water.
They're both. That's exactly right. They're just boring. In fact, there's a whole episode where they as in Will and Grace have found like this cool new couple.
Oh yeah, that wants to like party. They're like a hot, edgy couple, and Will and Grace want to like go out and party, so they're ditching.
They ditch Rob and Ellen, who just want to go to the Olive Garden, which hurt me deeply and made me feel very attacked, because I'm like, what's wrong with the fucking Olive Garden?
Yeah. And then they realize that they're like, no, we want to go back to our boring friends.
Yes, which I think is a great representation of what it's like to be in your 30s, is you think you want to go back to partying hard again and having no responsibilities, and you do it for like a night, and then you're like, okay, I've done this. We're fine. We don't need to do this.
Yeah, like because I partied a lot in college and
Mm-hmm.
after college, actually, now that
And
no, and I now very rare, like we don't, first of all, we don't go out to like clubs or things like that anymore just because it's going to be like 21 to like 23-year-olds. And honestly, too, the point of going to those places, it was like hoping to find somebody hot to flirt with. So like
well,
at this
yes,
point, it would be like we would go there and then be like kind of trying to whisper to each other in a corner. And it's just like, okay.
it isn't for us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. But like I was going to say few months, but it's even more than once every 6 months, I feel like I'll party a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always enough for the 6-month period or year. I'm like, that was good.
Well, it takes so much longer to recover.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. So like Robin, I keep forgetting their names because they're so boring.
Robin Ellen.
Are they're like the characters that like I can't really stand when they're on, but not I can't explain it. They're just like not terribly likable because they're so bland. But
Yes.
there are some characters where you're like supposed to find them annoying but still like them type of thing. And for me, it's like they serve their purpose, you know? They serve their purpose, and I think too sometimes I feel like they were very useful for reflecting like Will and Grace's relationship.
You're right. And they needed them for the game nights too. They're kind of the perfect game night couple, honestly. And then we've got the other couple friend was Joe and Larry.
Oh yeah.
And they would have like poker nights with them sometimes. And yeah, so those are kind of the not distant friends. What am I looking for? Just kind of like the outer circle of friends that you see kind of in and out of the show. But Tapwater is quite possibly the most perfect description of Rob and Ellen. And I feel like we all know or have known a Rob and Ellen couple.
Mm-hmm.
We might even...
Are you wondering if you're Tapwater?
Yeah, I'm like, hold on. Or you might be a Rob and Ellen couple, and I might be a Rob and Ellen couple. I'm going to think about that later, though, because otherwise I won't be able to finish this episode.
No, I think you're like what's it called? I just spaced bubbly water.
Okay. All right, I can take that.
Yeah, you're like a nice
Le Croix.
Le Croix. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll take it. Okay, let's talk about some mom stuff. Grace's mom, we've talked about briefly because we love her.
Mm-hmm.
R.I.P. She was in Halloween Town. I mean,
I like
that was the only thing
like...
she was in. She was in Halloween Town, and that's it. No, very famous actress. The reason I am still talking is because I have blanked on her name.
Debbie Reynolds.
Thank you. I was like, it'll come to me. She does a phenomenal job as Grace's mom. She is a total spotlight stealer, glory hog. She performs in musicals still. She's very eccentric.
Mm-hmm. Debbie Reynolds was just phenomenal. And I mean, she was phenomenal in everything she did. So what were we expecting?
Yes, truly. No, I did love the episodes with Grace's mom, even though their relationship is very strained.
Mm-hmm.
The chemistry between them, though, it's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good.
And in, I think it's season 2, we meet Jack's mom briefly because Will and Grace invite her for Thanksgiving. And this is the episode where she doesn't know Jack is gay. And this is one of my favorite lines from Karen because she says, how could she not know? What is she, headless?
It doesn't, it's either Will or Grace that says, like, deaf and blind people know you're gay.
Yeah, something to that effect. Yes, it's very, I mean, Jack is very noticeably gay. I feel like everything I'm saying is an insult and I don't mean it to be, but he's very out. Like
he's very, the thing is he's very stereotypically gay man, especially for late 90s. Yes. You would say like he's not somebody who could pass. Like Will can kind of, he can, I think you can use this for gayness. I know you can use it for other things, but he can kind of like code switch. Like he can go back and forth between being like very flamboyant and, you know, you'd be interacting with him and you're like, oh, he's totally gay. And then very, very straight.
Yes.
Or like passing for straight.
And they kind of poke fun at that in this episode because once Jack finally tells his mother that he is gay, she kind of goes on to say like, well, I guess there were signs. And then she says, I just, you're not as flamboyant as some of your other friends. Like, look at Will. And I just thought that was so funny because, yeah, I think he does come across, like you said, as he could be either or. You don't meet him instantly and go like, oh, I know that he's gay. But with Jack, you walk into a room and you're like, oh, okay, it's just Jack. He's definitely a gay fellow. But that was one of my favorite episodes because it's funny, but they also have some really heartfelt moments because Will does have to have a talk with Jack because Jack is so nervous to tell his mom, even though the joke is that like, how could she not know? You really get kind of a look at how difficult that must be. And I like seeing kind of the nicer friendship moments between Will and Jack because a lot of it is almost like friendly bullying between the two of them, especially not especially from Jack. They both do it. Jack, something that kind of, I would say doesn't necessarily hold up is Jack really pokes fun at Will's weight throughout the show. Like about how he needs to get to the gym and he's put on a few pounds and he's getting a little flabby, which Will is not a big man. Like Will is a very trim, fit man, not to like comment on people's appearance by any means. So there is a lot of that talk throughout the show. And then vice versa, Will very much kind of pokes fun at like Jack's intelligence. So I wouldn't say it's like a frenemy situation because they both clearly love each other. And I mean, Will like financially supports Jack throughout the entire show. So there is that, but there's some of that stuff that I don't know. Sometimes it almost gets to be like a little bit too mean.
I talked about this with a friend who I knew in high school who came out. It was like him and me as the only out people.
Okay.
And we were talking about how it seemed very common at that time. And to give you guys an idea, I graduated high school in 2012. We were talking about those. So like earlier than that, like years before that, we were talking about how it seemed very common that when men would come out or boys would come out, they would immediately take on more of almost like the Jack persona. And we talked about how, is this like one, it could be that is truly how they are and how they want to behave, but they've been masking it. And then we also were like, or is it just that like, especially at that time in the 90s and 2000s, Jack was the most common version of what you would see of a gay man. And it's like, this is the acceptable way to be a man and gay is that you have to be very like flamboyant and like this. And one of the things that has always frustrated me, because when you think about it, lesbians and gay men, we don't really have that much in common other than like sometimes people hate us and that. And I think one of the things that has really frustrated me about the gay male community, and this isn't obviously hashtag not all men, but like enough guys, is that it can be really hypercritical and particularly like hypercritical on looks.
Okay.
And this is my experience. And yeah, definitely experiences that I've heard from other gay women and straight women that it can definitely be like, I can be mean like this because I'm a gay guy.
Okay. So it might be, in the case of a show, it might actually be more of a cultural thing than a time period thing.
Yes. And so I think
that's interesting.
Once again, I have also definitely met gay men who are not like that. I've definitely had enough of those experiences where it makes me feel more anxious being around gay men, honestly, than even like sometimes straight men.
Interesting. It does. Well, it kind of reminds me of what for a long time female friendships are like, as far as there's more tearing down than building up. And I do think those things are changing slowly, but part of it is like kind of how we were brought up to think about other women. And, maybe part of it is, obviously personality comes into play and things like that. But I guess the way you're describing it kind of just reminds me of that as far as like, okay, this is how we behave towards one another. this is how girls behave, this is how gay men behave, sort of thing. And I do think it's an interesting point, though, that back in the day, there were only so many examples of gay people in media. So I'm sure that did play a part, like it has for any of us when we see an example of, a female character or a, whatever. You learn how to behave based on that. So that's interesting, because I don't really have any like personal experience to base that on. I noticed it a lot more watching it recently, that like there are a lot of just like underhanded comments, and like, some of it is funny, some of it's sitcom humor.
And I'm not saying that, like, friends sometimes do make those
Of
snappy
course,
jokes.
we all do.
Yeah. It's just, you're right. It is very much a part of their friendship. And it's one of the reasons why, and this is the thing, is I have actually never really liked Jack. I like his scenes with Karen, but I don't, because the thing is, to me, he represents the worst parts of the gay stereotype, which is just it's the meanness.
I
know.
Feel like I have just been pushed over a balcony by 3 Dalmatians. I am
3 rabid. Yeah.
Oh, is that one of your hot takes that you thought would upset me?
Yeah, that is. Yeah, it's one of my hot takes. And
upset.
I haven't watched the show in a long time, but when I think of Jack, his meanness is pretty much always about people's like appearances and their weight and things like that. And that is just something that really, really upsets me.
And it should, I guess. Wow. Okay. I'm processing.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea this side of you.
The reason why I like him more with Karen is because they have a different relationship. Yeah. And so I like seeing like that side of his character, where it is still, I mean, he's still flamboyant, he's still Jack, but to me it's much funnier than when he's just like constantly commenting about like weight or hair or looks. And I just think, I'm like, if I had a friend like that, I would hit them. Like, I'm not kidding. I would probably like punch them. As a youth, I would have. I might not. No, probably not. But I probably would have gotten into a fight, because I would have been like, back it up. Like, if you're going to talk shit, get hit.
Your favorite saying.
My favorite saying. Yeah.
You should just get that tattooed across your knuckles.
Don't tempt me. I've been thinking about getting another tattoo.
Mom. Her text to you about the motorcycle. I was waiting for her reaction. I'm like, she's gonna be pissed.
She was
rightfully so, because we know you, Sid. We know you. We know you, and we know you in wheels. Okay, well,
I want to be free.
You can want in one hand, and
what am I doing with the other? God,
I don't know. Actually,
this is uncomfortable.
I thought, for some reason, I thought it was shit in the other, but why?
Why?
You can want in one hand, and do something else in the other. Anyway, not buy a motorcycle in the other. I don't know. Call an Uber in the other, because you're not getting a motorcycle. How about that?
Okay,
so we talked about the moms. Another of my favorite episodes, though, is, do you remember the NBC Kiss episode?
I bet if you will. Yeah, I'm like, I think if you start talking about it, because it has been a while since I watched the show, like probably a few years.
This is a good one, because Jack is obsessed with this new show on NBC. I think it's called like Along Came You or something. It's not a real show, but there's supposed to be a kiss between 2 gay men on the show. And so it's a very big deal, because it's supposed to be like the first gay kiss on network television, which is wild to think about, because again, the show started in 98. So in this season, we're probably into the 2000s now. It's just crazy to me.
Yeah, none of this surprises me at all, I have to say.
Okay, well, I hate that. But so he gets Will and Grace to sit down and watch it with him, and they're all very excited. And when the 2 characters are supposed to kiss, the camera pans away to the fireplace, so they don't actually show the kiss. And this is one of those episodes where you do kind of see like a more serious side to Jack, because he's very upset about it, to the point where he wants to get Will involved, because Will's a lawyer, and he wants to go to the network and talk to them about it. Like, he's really upset about this. And at first, Will kind of blows him off because he's like, Jack, like, you're going to be over this in like a day. You know, like, it's
Mhm.
just Jack being Jack. I'm not getting involved. It's not that big a deal. Like, and Will honestly was like, I'm not surprised. Like, I never expected them to show it. But Will does eventually come support him at the network. And one of my favorite lines, though, is that when they're talking to, they finally send an assistant down to essentially give them lip service.
Yeah.
And the assistant is, you can tell that he is very much supposed to be gay, because he's like, you know, I understand, like, trust me, I understand. But essentially something to the effect of like, you know, we have to think about our viewers. And Jack says, it's a gay network, for God's sake. The symbol is a peacock.
Yeah, I do remember this episode.
Also in this episode, they're out of the studio. They're like out on the street and stuff. And they don't do that very often. And it always feels a little bit weird to me.
Yeah. Yeah. When they're like in public and stuff like
Yes,
that, it always feels, it's just wild.
it is. It feels very different. And they, after they get the brush off from NBC, they see Al Roker doing, I don't know, it's like the morning show or something. And Will ends up getting the idea. So they're trying to talk to Al Roker about this. And he's sort of just being Al Roker about it. And Will grabs Jack and kisses him live on television.
Yeah, I do remember that part.
And I don't know. I like that episode. They ruin Grace's alibi with that as well, because she's trying to break up with that just wet blanket of a boyfriend, Josh.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about him too. Not
He's
memorable.
the one who like gave her forehead kisses and was always getting her vitamins for like female stuff. Like, he was just a little too ushy gushy, and she's been trying to break up with him, but like, he's too nice. So she tells him that she's in love with Will. And then they're watching the show and they see Will kiss Jack, and she's like, God damn it.
I mean, she could have still been in love with him. It could have still worked.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
that's what
but-
I thought. Like, oh man, now I'm even more devastated because like, he's gay and I'm in love with him. Like, oh my
I
gosh,
need to
I'm
process
so
this
sorry.
single.
Yeah, I need to go work on myself, Josh.
Do you know that the first network television kiss between women was one of my favorite episodes of Buffy, The Body, Willow and Tara, and that was in 2001.
Oh my gosh, no, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Way to go, Buffy.
Buff. Yeah. I
Buff
also
and
think it
Rhodey.
might have had the first lesbian love scene on network television too, with Willow and Kennedy in season 7, which would have been, I think, 2003-ish.
I do not remember that character.
I don't think you've seen the final seasons, probably.
Oh my gosh. I need to get there.
I don't know if we could do it when you're here for my wedding, but if I come to hometown or if you come to this place for another time, we should binge Buff.
Okay. It's like after Riley, ironically, that like I remember bits and pieces, but yeah.
Well, we watched the finale. So we saw all through season 5 together, but that's when they switched networks. They switched, I think, UPN or something like that. And we didn't have that.
Oh.
So you probably haven't seen season 6 and season 7 because of that.
Maybe because kids, it's not like it is now where you can just find it somewhere.
No, I had to buy, and I couldn't get them like in our small town, so I had to order them online. And then when we went to Cape Cod, I found one of the seasons and I bought it because I was like, this is so hard to get anywhere else.
Well, I've been listening to the Rewatcher, and I've been kind of doing a rewatch of my own. So I think I can get caught up to like the last 2, and then you and I could sit down and like watch the last 2
Yeah,
together.
I would love that.
Okay.
That would be really cool.
Okay, now that we've made that plan on the air. Ooh, okay, another guest star I want to talk about is Butford, the Subway Tush puppet.
I do not remember Butford. Let me do a goog.
Sid, fuck off right now. No, yes you do. He was made from a pair of nylons and a cushion, and he would... Do you remember Subway Tush?
No.
Hey, mon frere, if your derriere could use
yeah.
a little cush.
Yep.
No need to pout, the word is out. It's Jack's Subway Tush.
Yes.
Okay, my God.
I haven't watched, it's been
okay,
years.
but like, I remember Butford.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's fine. and you tell me you don't like Jack, I'm just like really upset. And I don't know what the other hot take's going to be. And I don't know if I can handle it.
Actually, that's probably my only hot take.
Okay, good. One of my probably very, very favorite 2-part episodes is the kind of pre-Thanksgiving episode where they go over like Will and Grace's whole origin story in college.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the flashbacks to the 80s. Everybody has really bad hair in these. The costumes and hair are just amazing. Grace has almost like, her hair's almost cut into like a triangle. And it starts with the gang. So Will, Grace, Jack, and Karen are waiting for a table at a restaurant. It's the day before Thanksgiving, so they're all going to be off with their respective families. And there's this woman crying at the bar, and they kind of approach her, and she's talking about her relationship with Tom, who's just like this great guy. And she starts going on about how they have so much in common. Like they're both dance majors and basically all these little red flags that like Tom is very much gay. And so they kind of sit this woman down and they're like, we need to tell you about how Will and Grace met. And it just goes into, so essentially Will was very, very much in the closet in college in the 80s. And he and Grace were actually dating. And he is so far in the closet that literally she brings him to her, like her childhood home for the holidays. And she wants to have sex. He very much doesn't, obviously. And in a panic, proposes to her, which is just not what you should do in a panic. And they end up being estranged for a while because he finally admits to her and to himself that he is in fact gay. She's like, what the fuck? Why did you propose to me? And they're kind of separated for a couple of years. That's when he and Jack kind of become close. Jack is my favorite in this episode. His hair is wild. In fact, I did take some pictures. He's got braces.
Oh, yeah.
And he's technically in high school, I guess. But he's going to like these college parties, and he's honestly sort of harassing Will about not being out of the closet. And he like gives him his card and is essentially like, call me when you're ready to like admit that you're gay kind of thing. But anyway, so they end up becoming friends during the time that he and Grace are sort of separated. Then they obviously become friends again. I like this episode for a lot of reasons, mostly just seeing the hair and the costumes, but also just kind of seeing the evolution of all their friendships. And again, it kind of takes like a more serious tone in this one as far as like how hard it would have been to come out and to be openly gay at that time and that sort of thing. Let me send the pictures to you.
Yes, I'd love to see.
I feel like I sound really dumb when I talk about those issues because I haven't personally experienced them. So I just want to say that I'm not trying to act like I know how that feels or straight explain it, but
no, I give you permission to talk about it.
Okay. Because I don't want to be that person.
I think you're being overly cautious.
Okay. That's me.
What you're talking about is, I think, just like pretty factual, is that it was really hard to come out at that point. It can still be hard for people now, but it was definitely very difficult in the 90s and 2000s.
As I'm reading about the show's creators, which are both gay men, apparently Will and Jack, as far as the public knew, were straight, like the actors who played them. And Sean Hayes, who played Jack, didn't come out until 2010.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
I had no idea.
Oh, you didn't?
I guess I didn't really even think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like what the actor's sexuality was.
Well, I knew the actor who plays Will was straight because sometimes he would accidentally leave his wedding ring on while recording. And it was mentioned, I can't remember what else mentioned in.
Wow.
And you might be like, well, why does that mean it's straight? It's because like gay people couldn't get married. So
yeah, another
thing of the time.
Yep.
Oh my God. Yeah, his hair was.
All their hair is just incredible. Grace is though, my God.
It's like, I can't believe it's that shape.
Yes. Like, how did they get it to do that?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
I
do remember that episode. I have to say that And it's because I'm trying to remember, because I haven't watched this show in so long. And
Mhm.
I do kind of remember now that like watching as an adult, I do like Jack more. I kind of want to walk things back. When I was younger, his meanness really upset me.
Yeah.
And it made me like really hyper fixate on like what would he say bad about me, and then like thinking like what are people
Okay.
thinking about me, and like what would they make fun of. So it was something that it like he made me feel anxious. And
Yeah.
as I've gotten older, his character doesn't really do that as much, but I do get tired of him.
Well, and I don't think you're making bad points about the toxic friendship between the two of them as far as like some of the things that they say to each other, that they're not jokes, but they're presented as jokes.
Yeah, and that stuff I don't like, and I know that there are people who, because that's the thing, like I am gay, but I'm not a gay man. I don't do drag. So I know there are people in those communities who would explain potentially differently of like why they do that.
Even as an adult watching it recently, it did start to make me feel uncomfortable,
Well,
some of the comments that they made towards each other.
to me, what's kind of frustrating is that, like, honestly, I think about it as like, I would hate to have Jack in my life.
Oh, for sure. I like watching him as a character, but he'd be horrible to have as a friend in real life.
And I think that's what his character is supposed to be. You know,
Yeah.
sort of like Karen. You're not supposed to be like, God, I wish I had Karen in real life. But for some
Yes.
reason, it frustrates me more because I feel like Jack doesn't contribute anything to any of the relationship. It's like just constantly taking. And you could be like, well, Karen does.
Mhm.
And I'm like, but they kind of more so seek Karen out. They just like kind of
Yeah, they do.
drag her to things where like I'm just like, why would you still be friend? Like really, Jack just like uses your money. He's mean to
Right.
you. He constantly like gets into stupid situations and then wants you to get him out of it. And being like, oh well, he helped me come out. Having gone through a friend breakup and having just lost friends over the years from various things, I do believe that like certain people are not supposed to be in your life forever. And I feel
Mhm.
like it's very unrealistic. And I know this is a sitcom, but it just bothers me so much because Jack can really bother me still. Is that I just can't believe that Will would keep him in his life.
Yeah, if you analyze it the way we're analyzing it,
Yes.
there really isn't a good reason for the friendship. What I like most about Jack isn't, because you're right, relationship wise, he's not contributing anything. And in real life, I would not want somebody in my life like that. His timing and like physical comedy though are so next level that I think that's what I enjoy about him. That's what I enjoy watching.
Mhm.
So like in the Year of the Shoulder episode,
What is
so he as in Jack and Karen trick this kind of frenemy of Karen's into getting shoulder surgery so Karen can see what it looks like on somebody before she gets it
yeah.
done. So they're all at like this, it almost seems like a med spa or something. And I
Mhm.
can't remember what the circumstances are around them being there, but Karen and this woman end up in the same room, and Jack pretends to be like their masseuse, and he's massaging Karen. He's like, oh my gosh, like you have the best shoulders, going on and on. And then he gets to this other lady and he literally goes to put his hands on her shoulders and his whole body goes down. He slides off. And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, I'm sorry. There's just like, there's nothing for me to like hold on here. And he
I
just
do
keeps like
remember.
sliding off of her. And it's stuff like that where I don't know, like I just personally feel like I guess his acting is so brilliant in that way. Like he's always doing something with his body.
It's very physical acting. And
Yes.
that's the thing. No, I think the actor seems, from, once again, I haven't seen clips of him in a long time and stuff,
Yeah.
but he seems very sweet and is incredibly talented. Like he plays the character phenomenally. That's not,
Yeah.
I want to make sure it's not a critique on
No, and I
that.
didn't think it was.
Once again, though, like I find these moments with Jack more enjoyable because even though he and Karen are doing something awful, he's contributing.
Yeah. And we do see him contribute a little bit to a relationship though when Elliot comes along.
What does he do? Oh, right,
His son.
his son.
And he does kind of step up and try to build that relationship with him. But you're absolutely right. And I'm not discounting what you're saying. I was just trying to figure out, though, like why I so enjoy him, because normally characters like that do tend to wear on me. And for some reason, it really doesn't do that with Jack for me. But I think that is it, that I just so enjoy watching him, the actor.
Act. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's just, the things he does, like his mannerisms are just kind of brilliant.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
think that must be what it is that I just so enjoy kind of what he brings, maybe not to the relationships of the people, but to the show.
Mm-hmm.
Just like he's fun to watch in those ways.
And I think that is why I came to like his character a lot more as I got
Mm-hmm.
older, is I could I could kind of separate my like analysis. That's a stupid way to phrase it. I can't think of how to explain it, but like I was able to, I guess, see his character differently as I got older.
Let's switch gears a little bit, though, and let's talk a little bit more about Karen, because I mean, there's so much we could say, but mostly what I want to talk about is her voice evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the first season, she doesn't have the voice she does in later seasons. It's
Nope.
much lower. It gets like more and more kind of high pitched and silly, as does kind of her character in later seasons. She's still very funny, but I feel like she's more dry initially. Like she's more dry. She's definitely a little like meaner and more cutting. And then I feel like as the show progresses, and maybe it's the way that she and Jack play off of each other, but I feel like she goes more from being kind of like a very, maybe poised isn't the right word, but like, you know, rich lady kind of above everybody else. She's still that in later seasons, but she's also kind of like eccentric and silly. And the
Mm-hmm.
voice kind of gets more and more high pitched, I think, to like represent that. And honestly, I kind of prefer the earlier season Karen.
It's so
Maybe that's my hot take.
that could be your hot take. I actually looked it up because I remember reading something of the voice, and in this entertainment article, she says that the voice evolution kind of was natural, that she
Okay.
quote started doing it without thinking. And she says the pace of the show is quite theatrical and my natural speaking voice is very laconic. So I thought, well, I need to bring some energy to this character. And I thought that was a good way to do
Oh,
it. That's obviously Megan Mullally. That's how you say it, right?
I believe so. And she's brilliant too.
Oh, yeah, she's fantastic. I think the character is very different from the early seasons to the later. And it is, for me, I kind of go back and forth of which I prefer. And it kind of just
Mm-hmm.
depends on the episode, because sometimes there's more of almost a smartness earlier on, where sometimes
Yes.
she seems a little ditzier later.
I think that's exactly what it is. She's like more shrewd.
Yeah. And so I do appreciate that. But then she also has just some hilarious bits. I mean, throughout the
Yeah.
whole series, that it is really hard. And once again, I'm going to bring this up, I think, for the fourth or fifth time. I think I watched 2 episodes like 3 years ago. And before that, it's probably been like 6 years.
So it has been a long time.
Yeah.
And all that too is not to say, like, Karen is another one of those characters that I really do love, and she's played brilliantly. I mean, honestly, all the acting in the show is wonderful. It's a very well done show.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't say anything bad about that aspect, but I noticed the difference more rewatching it, and especially seeing like the first season Karen, because I think I actually remember later seasons Karen more.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yes. So then when I go back and watch her initially, I'm like, oh, she's very different.
I do get, though, how I feel like and I don't know if the character started out where she was going to be much more of a side character. I'm like, I could kind of see needing more for how much she's in it. That I do kind of get that evolution. Also, one of my favorite jokes is when it's in the first season, I think, and when Grace is talking about paying her and is like, do you never cash the check? Something like that. And like Karen is like, I put them all right. Like kind of like, oh, it's so sweet. You pay me. And she opens a drawer and she just has all her checks.
Yes. I love that. And there's an episode too where Will is trying to get her and Stan as clients. and they go out to like some piano bar and she makes him sing an Olivia Newton-John song to her like on the piano, and she asks him to suck a peanut off the tabletop.
And isn't he like refusing to? And then eventually he's like,
and she goes, suck it. And you can tell that was a moment too where you can tell she's about to break. Like she's about to laugh.
One of my favorite things is because I have some of the DVDs and I love watching the blooper reels. And also too, just on YouTube, watching blooper reels of them or some of their live performances where you can see like the other actors are like holding their lines because somebody is like trying desperately not to break and they need to like collect themselves. That's one of the things that I miss about DVDs. Are those extras are so fun.
I did just ask Mom what her favorite Will and Grace character is, and her initial reply was Anastasia Beaverhouse, which is a great answer.
That's such that's a deep cut.
Interesting. And but then she went on to say probably Jack or Grace.
I was going to call it.
Really?
I thought she was going to say Jack.
Okay. See, Jack doesn't surprise me. Grace, it's funny because I know the show is called Will and Grace. Grace gets on my nerves sometimes. And I think she's supposed to a little bit because they're very real characters. And like there are certain things that they do that you're just like, Jesus Christ, like again. And maybe it's more in later seasons, but I do feel like she kind of wore on me a little bit.
I could see that with you. From what I remember, she didn't with me. And I'm not actually that surprised that Mom put her as a possibility.
Okay. I love her hair in the earlier seasons. Just like the really big curls.
Yeah, well, I am spacing on the actress's name right now. Sorry, but
Deborah Messing.
Yes, she has beautiful hair.
Yes. No, and it's very fitting to her character. I think. So anyway, that is Mom's favorite characters. Actually, I feel like you will agree with me on this. One of my favorite ever, I guess he'd be considered a guest star, is Beverly Leslie.
Oh, Beverly.
Played by the late Leslie Jordan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he was very much supposed to be like, he said he was straight, but he had a very close relationship with his, quote, associate, Benji. And he had a wife named Crystal, but you never saw Crystal. She was just like not in the picture. And essentially he is Miss Karen Walker's frenemy. I'm not exactly sure why.
I do like his frenemy thing with Karen was always fun because they're both just kind of awful. So like you could you could just like take joy and like them fucking each other over because like there's no good guy.
Yes. And their insults towards each other were brutal.
Yeah. And for some reason those ones didn't upset me. I think it's just because Jack is supposed to be like an actual friend and he gets so much out of the relationships with other people that kind of would upset me.
And I think that makes sense because Karen and Beverly are very much not friends. And he's so little. So like Karen has referred to him as like a Keebler elf. She says to him, the only complaint you have is that the American Kennel Club hasn't recognized you as a breed yet. They
were just so vicious. I think that's one of the things where like, especially if you are Gen Z, there are definitely things that are probably going to make you uncomfortable because there is a meanness that is not embraced anymore, which is probably good. but it really is of the time, and it's just so good. And yeah, there are things that like some of the jokes definitely didn't age, and I think that some of the criticism I've heard is that Will is gay, but we don't really get him in like his main relationship. The main relationship is still straight because it's Will and Grace. And I used to, when I was younger, I used to kind of like high school and stuff. I sort of was like, God, that's true. But now, like, as I've gotten older, I'm like, but also like we wouldn't have had the show. Like we wouldn't have been able to get the show otherwise. And I think that it was a cultural touchstone for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. And I really liked watching it again. I I think I'm going to continue watching because I sort of just picked and chose
Mm-hmm.
a few episodes that I really wanted to have fresh in my mind. Oh, speaking of though, what we really should talk about briefly is Grace and Leo.
Okay. Yeah.
So Grace did get married because kind of obviously the show is centered around Will and Grace, clearly, but it's also centered around them kind of trying to find their person, but also the fact that their friendship is so close that that kind of inhibits them from having like healthy, like romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But they're both very much trying to find that person for each of them. And Grace eventually finds and falls in love with Leo, played by Harry Connick Jr. I was in love with him during the show. As you'll remember, they get married. I really liked their relationship and I liked he seemed to fit in with the whole group. And I know it obviously changed the dynamic, which is hard for a show that, again, it's centering around Will and Grace and their friendship. So when you bring in an actual romantic relationship that is working, that obviously changes things. And I feel as though after they got married, they perhaps should have ended the show.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did instead is I think they went, oh, this isn't the same show. And so they decided that Leo, when he was over at Doctors Without Borders, because he's a doctor,
Without a border.
cheats on Grace without a border. He has no borders.
Yeah.
And
Apparently,
all
no
of a sudden, no
boundaries.
morals. Yeah,
Yeah.
they completely, I felt like they just ruined his character
Mm-hmm.
simply because they were like, oh shit, we shouldn't have done that. Like now it's changed the whole vibe of the show. We're not really sure where to go from here. Again, I'm speculating on all of this, but I was really angry. And I feel like actually our entire family was pretty angry about
Yeah.
how they went about that and why they did it. And the show never felt quite as good after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then don't they get back together? And understandably, like, Will hates him.
Yeah.
I think that they either needed to make it, I'm like, you made this poor decision. I think you have to go with it. Otherwise, it's just going to be too weird and there's going to be too much tension.
Yes.
But what I don't get is that, one, I thought he actually worked, like you said, pretty well.
Yes.
I thought it was still fine, but
Mhm.
either cut it, but nobody's going to do that when it's making tons and tons of money. But what I don't
Yeah.
get is that, like, with him and Doctors Without Borders, you have him out of the picture.
Oh yeah. They could have just had him like call every once in a while, which they kind of did.
Well,
And then it was
yeah.
like, oh no, but now we're going to have him cheat and completely take him out of the show. But you're absolutely right. That could have almost been a joke a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, oh, nope, he's still at Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's just because, in a weird way, I mean, the relationship between Will and Grace isn't super healthy.
Mm-hmm.
From what I remember is that it's like they wish it could work.
They start the process to have a baby together. And that's actually when Leo comes into the picture. And there's a few episodes where there's like a lot of like Will and Grace are really fighting
I remember
over the whole situation. I hate those episodes. Like I still get stressed thinking about them. But yeah, so they have a very close, like you said, maybe almost unhealthy relationship. I don't know where I was going with that. I was mostly just agreeing with you, but
no, I think that like those episodes and those parts, to me, it got away from sitcom and it felt more like drama. And
yeah,
I'm like, it's funny because I think that hurt the show more than like trying to figure out how Leo works in it.
I agree. I totally agree.
I just think that, yeah, I think the difficult thing is, and you could say there's almost some, I don't know if you'd say like homophobia at the time, but like that they kind of had Will and Grace just like in love with each other platonically, where it's just like, okay, but like he's a gay guy. And like when you see the men she dates, that Will does not seem to be her type. And I'm like, I don't think it's homophobic. I think it's very 90s, 2000s that's a show. They wanted to make it about best friends going through this situation. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I'm losing the thread.
No.
I guess what I'm thinking is that it does make sense that the show it's going to be harder to work with when the whole premise is about their relationship being so close. It is like, why aren't they married? I wonder if it still didn't feel like it worked, even with Leo being out of the picture, because the main relationship in Will's life and Grace's life was each other. And now for one of them, it wasn't. And therefore, for Will, it also couldn't be, if that makes sense. Like Grace's main relationship was now with her husband, and Will's, couldn't be with Grace anymore. Even if the character's out of the picture, Grace is still going to be reliant and like focused on her marriage. And
Sure.
when she needs comfort, or, like when sad or silly things are happening, like it's still going to be her primary person is no longer going to be Will. So
That's true.
but I still think that they needed to be like, well, we made this happen, so we need to stay true to the characters. I prefer staying true to the characters in every situation, but
same. And that's why I kind of feel like, as much as nobody wants a show to end, theoretically, that should have probably been where they ended it. Because you're right. Then the whole premise of the show is now different.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to talk about, maybe briefly, probably not too long. So did you watch when they did the, reunion is not the right word. What's the revival? Yeah. Did you watch that?
Yeah. I can't, were there multiple episodes?
There were a few. There weren't many.
I can't remember if I watched all of them or if I just watched one. It didn't feel the same.
No, it didn't hit the same way, which in my personal experience seems pretty typical when a show comes back after that long. Because it happened to me with Arrested Development too. I did not like the revival seasons one bit. And I loved that show, but I felt like the chemistry wasn't quite there. And I think also part of the reason why I like Will and Grace, or any show from that era that we watched as a family, is because, number one, it's like the comfort. I remember things about us watching it together. And so that's kind of missing with new episodes, right? And it always feels almost like they're trying too hard, because of course the references are going to be updated because it's a new time, but it always feels a little bit forced, even though I know they can't go back to talking about like Britney Spears and whatever they were talking about in the night, like all those references that I'm used to them making. It still doesn't feel right to have them making current references, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Because I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to think what it is, because it's like it was always a show that referenced like tons of pop culture, but it referencing it now feels.
Why does it feel weird?
Yeah, I don't know. Did they keep the character? Like, did the characters age in relationship to how many years had passed?
See, and that's the other issue, I think, is if you'll remember the finale of Will and Grace originally, they did like a flash forward where I think Will and his partner had a kid, and Will and, I guess it would have been Leo, because they got back together, had
Grace
a kid.
And Leo, yeah.
So, Will had two partners. He took Leo. So then they sort of just, I think they actually made a joke about it, like being a dream. So number one, right off the bat, I was like, I don't like that.
Yeah, I hate that it was a dream thing.
Yeah, we're just trying to pretend that didn't happen. So they kind of had to get rid of the ending that they created. But I do believe they were supposed to be aged appropriately. I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I did not like it. And then also it sounds like, now that we have social media and we're seeing kind of like any behind the scenes drama on shows now, it seemed like there was a lot of drama and conflict between the stars of the show in real life. And for whatever reason, when I see stuff like that, it makes it hard for me to watch something in the same way.
Was it just drama just with the revival, or had it always been there? Allegedly.
I'm not entirely sure if it had always been there or it just came out, or maybe something happened during the revival that sort of caused issues.
I was talking about, because this is just something, it's talking about celebrities that might be Justin was like, after we recorded about Crossroads, he was kind of like, have you checked in on Pentucky? And I was like, no, because I really pride myself on not following celebrities, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sent me, I'm trying to see if I can find, I think he sent me screenshots because he's a sweet baby Angle, pretty much. The actress does not seem to be doing very well. Just,
Oh no.
yeah, he said you should look up Kentucky as of late. And there was just like these posts, I'll send you this one, that are just very pro Trump and like religious zealot-y, and like she sounds unwell
Oh
in them.
no.
So that was, yeah.
That's
This
unfortunate.
is genuinely why I really don't look into celebrities, is that I am like, they're not their characters,
Yeah,
and I like, or I'm interested in the characters. I'm like, I respect that it takes talent to like play those characters, obviously, and like skill. But
of course.
I was talking about this with my boss recently, where I was like, I don't really care about meeting like actors or actresses. I'm like, if I could meet the character that they played in real life, I would love to,
Right.
but I don't really want to meet the person because one, two, it's like you're just on such unequal footing. And I don't like that. And also, the character will always be cooler than the real person.
Oh, for
So
sure.
it just, I don't even know if this is worth posting anywhere, but I just want to say, because I feel like we were praising her a lot, and I just wanted to be like, oh,
Yeah. I mean, we were praising her acting,
mm-hmm.
so I feel again, sometimes it's a hard line because obviously you don't want to support somebody that you very much disagree with on those types of things, but somebody can be a good actor and not so great a
Yes,
person. And us saying that they acted well in something is not necessarily us being like, we love them.
yes,
So, but I think that is important to bring up because I had no idea.
yeah, and I think it's. I could see somebody assuming that we were in agreement with, just because we didn't bring it up at
Hmm.
all. So just know,
That's a good
guys,
point.
that if there's somebody doing shitty things who's an actor or whatever, and we don't bring it up, it's just because we don't know.
100%. Because I had no idea.
Thank God Justin like sends me all of these things.
Yeah.
Justin also knows what's going on in the town I live in better than I do. So sometimes he'll be like, "Oh, cool. Are you checking this out?" And I'm like, "I had no idea what was going on. Thank you for letting me know." Also, oh my God, this we have to do. Justin went to, there is a NASCAR race in Sonoma. Do you
Yeah.
see?
I did. That was really cool.
Yeah, he took this awesome photograph, and it's been blowing up in the like NASCAR world and socials. And so I'm really proud of him and excited for him.
Do we plug his photography?
You can follow him on Instagram at Justin Sheldon Photography.
Ooh, ooh.
Ooh, ooh. Part of what feels really weird, I think, with revivals is that there's so much of that time of when like the original show took place. I think it feels weird being like, oh, this hasn't been on the air in 20 years and so much has happened in 20 years. And it's like, I think that's it. It's like the characters are the exact same. Like
Mm,
they're the exact same as they were 20 years ago. And now they're like, here's a joke about Ariana Grande. And it
yeah.
feels so strange that it really is like they've been in a time machine or a stasis pod for 20 years and they've been let
Yes.
out. It feels very, like you said, it feels very forced, and it always has that feeling of like, oh, this is a revival, this is trying to recapture something. But I don't think I've ever seen it work.
No, same. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. So if it is supposed to be, an appropriate amount of time in the future, you're not seeing any of the characters evolve in any way. It's like with the Karen voice. When I compared season 1 to like the later seasons, it's like, oh my gosh, that's completely different. But you're not getting that as,
You're not getting the progression. Yeah.
yeah, when it's the progression, it's like you sort of start to notice it's different, but it's not like a huge shock. And you're just like, oh, okay, that's how she talks now. But when you have all that time cut out, you're like, okay, well, what have these characters been doing? And yeah, why are they exactly the same when they should be different? But then if they were different, you'd be like, well, why are they different?
Yeah,
Like,
I
it doesn't
really,
work.
it doesn't work. It does not work. I just really hope that the revivals fad, it probably will never die, but I just want it to. And I think a
Yeah.
big portion of it is, especially like millennials, we have a lot of nostalgia. And I think that our nostalgia comes from we've lived through a lot of market crashes and a lot of huge bad national events and wars and things like that, that I think it's a comfort thing, you know, trying to grab onto
Yes.
nostalgia. But the revivals aren't the way to do it, guys.
They're not.
The only revival I have ever been like, I'd totally watch that. It was going to be a Lizzie McGuire revival. She was going to be an adult, though.
Yes.
And I think it was going to be more like PG-13, a little pushier than that.
I was really disappointed when that didn't go through.
Because, I think that in that case, I'm like, that could have worked because you would be updating it if it was for our age group, like, so a little beyond PG-13. If it was for our age group, I'm like, that could maybe work. It at the same time, though, could have just been really weird. It definitely could have been weird because if you're seeing like Lizzie McGuire as an adult and being like, oh man, there's a naked man in her bed, like that might just be strange.
Sure.
But I was more interested in seeing that because you would have such a drastic progression of the character of her at like 14 and then like now her in her mid 20s or something like that. I'm like, that to me felt like it could work.
Yeah, she kind of would have been a totally different character almost.
Yeah.
Or like she would have been familiar, but it would have been very much like its own show. So I think it really could have worked. And I would have been curious to see if they could have done it.
Yeah, I think it's just that like the audience, it would have been the same audience, but it would have been meeting us where we're at now. You can see the character progression where when you're going from like adults in their mid 30s to how old are they supposed to, like, are they now mid 40s, but it's been 20 years? Are they still like, you know, that gets, that just ends up feeling, it feels really weird. And you just kind of, I feel a little displaced. And I think part of what is so difficult is with like certain revivals, some of the stuff that is so nostalgic for us is the like things that you could only experience in the 90s and 2000s.
Yes.
Not saying that like the shows were only that, but I'm like taking them out of that environment does really change it.
You are so right, because as soon as you start introducing kind of like the social media aspect and things like that, I'm like, ooh, I don't like it. It immediately just makes me go, ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't want to see how Jack would be on social media or things like that. Like it just, that kind of stuff would be like a level of realism where I'm like, what is that bringing to the characters in the show? Like, I don't think we need that.
No. We covered a lot.
We did.
I kind of figured it would be a bit of a longer episode, though, because we do have a lot of memories from Will and Grace, and it is a show that we kind of bonded over as a family. So it is a very good show. There are small, we'll say, issues here and there that I think come mostly from the time it was released. But other than that, I mean, the humor is still amazing.
Yeah.
And again, as we were just kind of talking about, the references are very nostalgic. They have a lot of really good guest stars throughout. I mean, I didn't even touch on
there's so many guest
most
stars
of them.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got like Matt Damon, Woody Harrelson was on there for a while. Lots and lots of good guest stars too, which is always fun.
It is a fantastic show. And like you said, the things that don't work now are, you just have to watch it through the lens of when it came out.
But I think for the most part, it's still pretty relevant in a lot of ways. Just dealing with relationships and whatnot.
And Mint Milanos. I do still often quote that to myself. So yeah, I guess we give this one thumbs up.
I give it a thumbs up.
Well, guys,
all right.
It's late. Yeah. Love you. Bye, guys.
Goodbye.
You've reached Sid
and Riley.
We can't come to the phone right now,
so leave a message after the beep. Ruining Our Childhood was filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Psych. But it is produced by us, Riley and Cassidy.
With music by Joseph Tuna Medish.
You can follow us on Instagram at ruiningourchildhoodpod.
Or send us an email at ruiningourchildhoodpod@gmail.com.
Support the show through our Ko-fi account, ko-fi.com/ruiningourchildhoodpodcast.
Later!